awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are live with me at the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. Should you feel the urge, you might call in 573-746-8020. And if you don't feel the urge, then don't. Taking emails, which I sometimes read, but truly not very often, live at damnradio.com and or Samuel T. at internationalflavor.com. All of my shows are always put out at internationalflavor.com after the fact. Here on Damn Radio, you can listen to us live Sunday through Thursday from 9 p.m. to 10:30, or you can always listen to the podcast version at internationalflavor.com. Plus, JR has done a very, very good job of putting all of the wonderful content from Damn Radio stars, yes, stars, the people who bring to you talk without boundaries. And these people are always put out at damnradio.com/podcasts, and there are plenty of good content for you. To be truthful, I did some review, but I didn't prepare anything massive for tonight. There's been plenty of nonsense going on in the world continually. I have been digging into it somewhat. I wanted to start tonight with a small... So the escalations are continuing, okay? So the OG will sanction, OG will do this, OG will bomb them into submission. There are plenty of videos out there in English and in Russian on both topics that truly are distressing, because people are morons and they aren't resolving the issues. They're just playing, who's got the bigger appendage. And I dislike that. There were some interesting things that went on that I'm going to share with you tonight. Lavrov gave a speech. He gave an interview on YouTube. So I'm going to summarize it for you so you don't have to listen to it yourself. And it was pretty neat. He had a YouTube discussion. Putin gave a speech also, and it was a long speech, and I'm not going to cover the whole thing, but there's one little chunk of it. Because when I started prepping for today's show, from all the news of this morning, and having a look at it, everybody's talking, and I don't know, but I figured I'd jump in and find out why everybody's talking about it. It's the Burevestnik. The Burevestnik is a nuclear-capable loitering missile. Now, I talked to you a little bit about these before, and how they are being developed in Russia, and I've got a little bit of a history for you that I want to go through, but I want to start with it with, I'm going to probably start a little bit in reverse, and I don't know the exact date of this, but it was within the last few days, and so I didn't have time to go and find out exactly when it was, but it's a translation of a short, just a couple of 3-4 minutes maybe, that I'll share with you, that starts with Putin. And he's talking, and so Putin showed up. I don't know if you know this, but they also call Putin the commander-in-chief, right? And one of the differences that has happened over at least the last few years is that when Putin is having a military meeting with all of his generals and meeting with all the staff and whatnot, he puts on a uniform. And so he leads the table, as it were, in uniform. And so this has happened a few times. So, and if you wanted to go out and find some of these, you probably could. on YouTube. Find some. The interview with Lavrov is out there, but it was in Russian. I had to translate it. The discussions, everybody's talking. All the news junkies like me are talking about the Burevestnik, and basically, and I'll share some with you, but I'm going to do it in reverse. I am starting with Putin, and then I'll go back to where we were besides that, okay? And this is it was posted today, and all the news has been today, but I think this was really yesterday, but who the hell knows? You can't tell. So basically, he starts it off by saying, because they're talking about their strategic offensive rocket forces, we have once again demonstrated the reliability of Russia's nuclear shield. Strategic forces, Russian, are capable of ensuring national security of the Russian Federation and the former Soviet Union. We've already mentioned this fact, which is well known to all military experts in the world. The modernity, I don't know that that's really a word, but that's how it translated it. The modernity of our armed forces, or the nuclear deterrence forces, is at the highest levels. It is possible to say, without exaggeration, that Russia is at the highest level of all nuclear states. Now, I truly believe this. They were ahead of us before, and they have developed, and their nuclear sub-forces or strategic nuclear forces are far superior to ours. Hell, we can't even build a ship. We don't have any new shipyards. We got nothing. Ours is ancient compared to theirs. Theirs is quite modern. As for the exercise that was held, I asked the Chief of Staff to report on that event. I mentioned it briefly in my introductory remarks, and I am talking about the test of the cruise missile with unlimited range, the Burevestnik, with its own nuclear power plant. Nuclear powered. Okay. This is not a ballistic missile of any kind. It can go and sit in the sky off of any place in the world that it wants to, with basically unlimited power source. Okay. But, as far as attacks go, I know that I have a report from the industry as well as from the Ministry of Defense. This is a unique product that no one else in the world has, and this is true. Moreover, I remember very well when we announced that we were developing such a weapon. Even experts of very high level told me that this is a good and worthy goal, but it will never be achievable. This was the opinion of the experts at a very high level. Now, decisive tests have been completed. There's a lot of work to be done to put the weapon into service, so I would like to hear the opinion of our Chief of Staff. And here's what Chief Staff said. Our test was conducted on the 21st of October. The difference from our previous tests was that it was a multi-hour flight of the missile, during which it covered a distance of 14,000 kilometers. This is nowhere close to the limit. The Burevestnik allows us to use with a guaranteed accuracy at high defense objects at any distance. In addition, during the flight of this missile, all of the vertical and horizontal maneuvers were performed. Thus, the Burevestnik was able to cover easily a distance of 14,000 kilometers. The Burevestnik was in the air for about 15 hours. And then it goes back to Putin. This is not the limit. We will have to decide which class of weapons this new system belongs to. We need to determine possible methods of application and start preparing the infrastructure for deployment of this weapon in our armed forces. And that was the brief discussion that was between Putin and his missile defense chief, or missile chief. This is a strategic rocket forces guy, and he put out today. So everybody knows, if you listen to this channel, hardly ever, that I have been involved in the past in nuclear reduction, nuclear armaments, getting rid of nuclear testing, getting rid of strategic rockets of short and intermediate ranges under the INF Treaty. I was trained in the START Treaty, really didn't do a whole lot on that, but I was certainly involved in the Nuclear Threshold Test Ban Treaty and in delivering of verification equipment into Moscow for verifying their underground nuclear testing, and taking trips and delivering inspectors all over the United States for the verification of ours by the Russians. And I've said again, but I'll repeat it, that it seems to me that we have been wasting our time creating an enemy that doesn't exist, and now we're trying to create an enemy that does exist. If you remember my diatribe from Thursday when I talked about Medvedev and talking about how he was saying that the U.S. is our enemy. They shouldn't be, but they are, and they're making themselves they're making us their enemy. We've been doing that for 50 years, and hell, 30 at least, since I was involved in this, in the all through the initial 90s. And what have we done since then? Collapse of the Soviet Union. We created an enemy that doesn't exist. And now, what are we doing? Now we're forcing, and I don't mean we, I mean the deep state, the idiots that want this crap to continue in Europe, in England, in America, are all pushing Trump, and he's under pressure. Like I said in the show on Thursday, if you want to hear that, go back and listen to Thursday's show on internationalflavor.com. And now where are we? We're back to nuclear gamesmanship, back to mine's bigger than yours, mine's better than yours. Oh, we can build those too. We're up to $1 trillion defense budgets. We're up to NATO or all of the EU all putting out their 5% of everything to jack it up. And who's the bad guy? Russia, China. All we do is talk about enemies. Trump wanders around the world claiming to make peace, but he doesn't do it on the big stage. The big ones, we need those to continue because we have to win. According to our deep staters, you can't just pull the plug on it and say, they can never admit they were wrong, and they won't. And it's a shame that they won't. But we all know they're wrong. Everybody knows they're wrong, but they just will never admit it. And rambling about that like I do gets kind of frustrating. And I've listened to some other people ramble about it as well, unfortunately, in the last couple of days. So let's look at it's called the 9M730 Burevestnik. Let's see what the West says about it. It's also referred to as the Skyfall, the Blunt, and here's a no BS, according to the the put together of all of this. What it is a ground-launched, nuclear-powered, and nuclear-capable, could carry a nuclear warhead, that means, cruise missile that Russia says can loiter for hours or even days and fly anywhere on the planet, hugging terrain and dodging defenses. First unveiled by Putin in 2018. Okay, the concept and the catch. Propulsion. Most open source assessments point to a nuclear thermal air-breathing engine. Think of a ramjet engine heated by a miniature reactor of its own that promises near unlimited range, but at the cost of potentially radioactive exhaust. This is what the West is saying. Oh, geez, it's a flying Chernobyl, you're nuclear powering. Well, there are all kinds of nuclear-powered submarines. You know, nobody says anything about that. How it starts. A solid fuel booster kicks it into the air. The reactor-powered engine then takes over for the long haul. Russian OSINT agreed on the basic sequence, so it's kicked off by a solid fuel booster. So why build it? Moscow says it's in answer to U.S. missile defense post-ABM treaty collapse. All of the treaty collapsing, and the U.S. saying, we're not going to limit what we do. So Russia says, well, neither will we. And we're ahead of you, by the way. And so the treaties are collapsing. All right, fine. Let's up the ante then. That's what everybody else is doing. Okay. Well, let's see. It's also sold politically as a route around everything, and it's a second strike option. So everybody remembers war games, and Matthew Broderick saying that he you can't win, and all the stuff. Shall we play a game, and playing checkers so that you can't win, and then suddenly the machine decides that it can't win a nuclear war. Because everybody's going to strike everybody and you can't win. Frankly, I still believe that to be true. How did it take us to a movie to get to that? That's what they called the deterrence back in the day. And then they started to eliminate some of the threat, but so far hasn't gotten all that way. So what Russia says about what can be verified in the West, what they say in the official claims. And I just read to you what they said today. They said they tested it on October 21st, and it worked, okay? Sorry about that. Got a little bit of a froggy in the throat today. So in 2018, Putin unveiled the low-flying, unpredictable, unlimited range nuclear-powered cruise missile. That was Kremlin 2018. October 2023, Putin says one of the first successful tests was conducted. Western outlets gave no independent confirmation. And now, in October 2025, now I saw something about 6 months ago from a different source that said that the Russians had these and that they had done some limited tests that didn't go into it, didn't go in as much detail as what I have today. And so I haven't been able to find anything. But today, everywhere, everybody's talking about it and talking about what they're putting out and trying to figure out if they can verify. So like you heard that I gave you the complete rundown of the officials that now claim 14,000 kilometer, 15 hours of flight, near global reach. This is Moscow, what they're saying so far, not necessarily independently verified. So the test and assembly sites are Pankova, which is in Novaya Zemlya, which Novaya Zemlya is up in the Arctic Circle. Now, when I was involved in the nuclear threshold test ban treaties, they would either be doing underground nuclear testing in Kazakhstan, I think it was called Semipalatinsk, and then Novaya Zemlya, which is up in the Arctic Circle, means new land, and it's basically an ice island, and it's got land too. But they were doing. This is where they say they were. This Pankova site shows recurring activity tied to Burevestnik testing. Nyeneksa and Nyoneksa on the White Sea is the other key range linked to this program. The probable deployment, 2020 can't even talk today, 2024 satellite work by Eveleth and Lewis flagged a new fixed launch complex near Vologda 20, Vologda 20, basically, and Chibsara, adjacent to a nuclear warhead bunker farm. Reuters published imagery and expert views of that site. So, in 2019, there was an event on August 8th of 2019 in the Nyonyksa area. An explosion during work with an isotope power source killed 5 Rosatom specialists. And Rosatom is the Russian government atomic company that does all of their nuclear development, nuclear test sites, nuclear reactors, nuclear power, all of this. And that's Rosatom. And they do it all over the world. I told you that the Rosatom is doing a huge nuclear site, nuclear power station in India, several of them, that I talked about several weeks ago, and other times as well. And in nearby Severodvinsk, saw a brief radiation spike. And so the president's nuclear service ship was documented. So the 2019, they're saying this happened, and there were isotopes detected. Russia's own meteorological service later cited short-lived SR-91, BA-139 and 140. What is that called? Strontium-91? I forget from my long-ago nuclear knowledge. They were consistent with a reactor release, not a simple rocket being shot off. So the bottom line, the program does have a non-trivial radiological risk in testing, and even in deployment. And, that's actually occurred back in 2019. Okay. So what do we actually know in the West about it? Okay. The speed and altitude is officially described as subsonic and very low altitude with an ability to sneak under the radar. And we know this is true. The unlimited range line comes from the reactor, not from the speed of it, right? It says it's a fixed berm-launched pads under construction near the 2 sites I told you about, Vologda 20, linked by roads to nuclear storage, an unusual co-location that raises expert eyebrows because they can do this. Arms control status. Okay, these are not counted under the New START Treaty. And Washington could, in my view, should seek talks to cover it, but there's no active mechanism now. There was a comprehensive test ban treaty. I was at the threshold test ban treaty, but now it's a comprehensive test ban treaty, and they were allegedly revisiting getting out of that, de-ratifying that, because the U.S. has done so much with the rest of them. And there are talks about other people doing underground nuclear testing. So our last U.S., as far as I'm aware, was the one I was in attendance for in like 1992 or 93, was our last one. And we were the last. Russia had one in the works, but they took it off the table. Everybody agreed. It was time to get rid of them. Now here we are, dicking around with this again, and going to make it worse for the planet, right? So what are the Russian and Western analyses, the best of the public takes that I could find, right? The war zone, which is an excellent long-running, descriptor, person who comments on this, on the Nyenunska and the Pankova ship tracking and test windows, say they're skeptical on practicality. They haven't said anything about whether it works or not. They're saying it might not be practical. And mostly because of the radioactive exhaust that possibly comes out of there. Reuters investigations, they said that the deployment near site Vologda 20 collates says that that they can't deny it. You know what I mean? Basic briefs from the capability summaries. The 2023 test claims were very cautious with that. And they say it's likely limited versus ICBMs. That ICBMs, you don't really need to replace them with these. But these are to be loitering, meaning they can just hang out. You could put them out, outside of international waters and just have them sit there, until the fuel runs out. And so I don't know. There's a lot of people talking about it. There's I don't know what this stands for, NTI. They say there's a poor test record and that they've had quite a few results through 2024 with only a few successes. Well, okay, that means they're still developing it, though. And the UK, at Hockenhull, which is their strategic verification site, warned a subsonic nuclear-powered cruise with global reach, near indefinite loiter, will definitely complicate defenses, but that doesn't show that it's proof that it's ready for exploitation use right now. Russian state, Kremlin, TASS, other places like that, emphasize this unique and invincible attributes in successful reactor unit tests, but they aren't providing any technical detail. Well, who would? Like we're going to talk about anything we come up with here, right? Well, what's the honest strategic value? What does it give Russia, in other words? If it works, which they say it does now, it gives them an unpredictable, ultra-long endurance, second strike, retaliatory strike option that can loiter and attack from odd azimuths after defenses are already saturated. So what do you do if you want to do something in Ukraine? Let's say you have you don't have to put a nuclear warhead in it, but you have a nuclear loitering munition, right? A loitering missile. So this is what both sides are doing to each other right now. The Ukrainians to attack civilians on beaches in Crimea, and apartment buildings and cars and crap like that. They are bombarding the airwaves, the air with drones, tons of them. So you send over 200 drones. Russia sends over 600 drones one night. Then they send along with it. So they let the drones all go in and take all the Patriots, the expensive $1 million Patriot missile, being used to take out a drone, and they saturate it and make all of these things go. Now the Ukrainians are doing it too on the Russian side against the or the S-400s and the other defensive missile forces in Russia. They're doing the same thing by sending over a sheer volume of tons of weapons, tons of drones, right? And so you saturate them, and then you send over the bigger ones later. So it's hard to pick out which one it is, and the automated systems can't really pick out which ones they are. And so if you've saturated them all and they've spent all of their air defense, suddenly you send in the bigger ones toward the end and they're unhindered. They just reach the target. That's that. And so it's unfortunate, but that's what they're doing. And that's today's warfare, okay? And this is why the Ukrainians want to be able to bomb deep inside of Russia and take out things like that, because they want to send over a couple of hundred and take out Russian oil platforms and burn them up and stop the war. And that is what the old Trumpster is trying to contemplate these days. But they can't do it without our intelligence, and that means we're directly involved. I think it's a joke to think we're not directly involved now anyway. So, I don't know. I'm not encouraging that it happen, but because all you're doing is upping the ante, and somebody's going to do something stupid before too long. So, Russia having the ability to loiter, they can send them all out at once, right? and have the last ones be these ones that could hang out for hours on end and then come in with a pretty good size warhead. No, don't need a nuclear capable warhead, but you have a nuclear reactor powering it for distance, right? And so that's what it brings to Russia if they really want to. That's, the sales pitch from the arms manufacturer anyway, for somebody who's going to go, here's what you're going to get. You take out your enemy, here's how you do it. And so what the critics would say, it's still a slow cruise missile, trackable and killable given time, and radiologically messy in testing and potentially in flight. A high-risk boutique weapon that adds more politics and pollution than new leverage. That's what the West is saying. Well, okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to radiate the atmosphere with a missile that isn't very fast anyway, and we can take out. So between, let's see. Let's take the key chronology here. It should be about ready, right now, because from 2018 to now, they've done some serious tests on it, and probable deployment all through 24, successful testing in 23, imagery and program activity 2021. In 2020, 2019, they had that accident in the Rosatom and the radiation spike. And then 2018 is when Putin first started putting it out in his Federal Assembly address, right? So what we should watch out for is Novaya Zemlya, that new land up in the Arctic Circle. Pankova. Logistic spiking, barges, Sevmorput, which means southern sea route, temporary jetties, all kinds of radiological ships. Serebryanka is there in the White and Barren Seas. Everything is going good. Volodya 20 site build out is continuing to be built, and so there's plenty going on this end. So it looks like this is actual, this is true stuff, okay? And, we had the president with his commentary on the chief of staff that I shared with you, which is what it's saying right now. The other big topic that is going around right now, and I watched this, this morning when I was still not sleeping, and laying in bed, just laying there. I get so frustrated. It's like I'll lay there for an hour trying to sleep, and finally we'll either grab the TV remote or grab my tablet or my phone and look at it and pull something up and watch it and try to make myself sleepy, again. Although I'm sleepy as hell, can barely keep my eyes open and they're painful behind it and all that. It's just depressing. And anyway, I watched a couple this morning about Pokrovsk and Mirnograd and Kupiansk that are completely encircled. And I feel like I should, I might play one of them for you, and not just because I think they did a pretty good job of explaining them and explaining what was. So there's allegedly 10,500 soldiers surrounded in two different spots. And you know what? Maybe I will play a piece for you and take a solid drink. But let me see if I can come up with the spot here of where it is. And I think that we will, because he also spoke a little bit. This is my military summary channel guy that is talking about these. And we've been talking about Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, even here, which I bring up a few times, that talks about the loss of these big cities is going to be a big deal. And the Ukrainians are losing this, and they're let's go ahead and put it out there for just a little bit, and we'll see where we can go from here. But I want to skip the stuff that we talked about with the Putin thing, and it'll start right in the middle of somewhere weird here, but that's okay. Let's see where we go.
That the city of Kupiansk and the entire Kupiansk agglomeration was encircled by the armed forces of the Russian Federation without any chances for Ukrainians to escape this cauldron. So, of course, if we take a look at this map, at this configuration of the line of combat contact, it is very difficult to imagine how the Russians managed to encircle Ukrainians if the distance, let's say, between the Russian positions in the northern part of the city of Kupiansk and around the settlement of Kolesnivkivka is around 14 kilometers. So obviously, these 14 kilometers is enough for Ukrainians to escape this encirclement, but everything is not so simple. For example, let's rewind the number of updates for the 25th of October of 2025, and we got 4 geolocations from this part, from the area of the city of Kupiansk-Uzlavoy. And these 4 icons will give us the exact understanding of the situation on the ground. So this is the first video that took place in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Osinova. The Ukrainians were trying to bring additional reinforcements or some food, and this vehicle was immediately destroyed by Russian FPV drone. And the most important part of this video is that first Russians destroyed this vehicle, and then the second drone appeared in this area immediately. So the Russians have hundreds of drones hidden in this area, and they can switch from one drone to another without any problems from
I don't know if I explained that part to you before about how they are doing that and why they are beating the snot out of anybody that goes on the road in a military truck and tries to supply, tries to do anything. There's, everybody's saying they don't even have, Ukraine has any tanks left. Their artillery is all gone. And they have, if you remember a couple of months ago, I told you about how artillery and strategic forces are being turned into frontline infantry forces because they don't have any equipment left. And so, they're just rifle forces. And it's really sad. And it is definitely a meat grinder. I'm not saying they aren't doing their share of killing of Russians in the especially with the FPV drones in these everything, and some artillery, but they don't have any artillery. The Ukrainian artillery is gone, and they don't have anything, and all they have is meat, and that's terrible to say, but it's meat. And the Russians control the skies around Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, is what he's saying. And the point was, so you blow up a vehicle, and immediately after the vehicle is blown up, you have another flying drone cameraing the whole thing and still surveying the scene. And this is everywhere. They have drones attacking Ukrainian drones and blowing them out of the sky. There's so many of them, and I don't mean to laugh about it. This war needs to end. And for people to claim that Ukraine is winning or has a chance to win, nonsense. And so let's listen a little further.
Ukrainian, let's say, different equipment. So another video took place in the same area. Another Ukrainian truck was moving most likely in the direction of the city of Kupiansk-Uzlavoy with some provision, with food, maybe with munition. But the Russians discovered this vehicle, and then they destroyed this vehicle immediately. And the second and the most important part is that right after the Russians destroyed that truck, the second drone appeared in this area immediately. So Russians have 24 hours, 7 days, let's say a week control over this territory with hundreds of drones that can be replaced, let's say, within seconds or something like this. Another video took place along the river Voskol. So here we can see how Ukrainians were trying to escape this encirclement, but Russians destroyed the Ukrainian vehicle immediately with FPV drone without any chances for Ukrainians for successful evacuation. And the fourth and the final video of the 25th of October took place on the territory of the city of Kupiansk-Uzlavoy. The Ukrainians Ukrainians were trying also to escape the cauldron, but they were destroyed immediately with Russian FPV drone. So we're just trying to tell that Russians control this territory with FPV drones, and this is most likely the only place where Ukrainians can escape the eastern bank of the river Voskol towards the mainland, but we see that Ukrainians have no chances. Ukrainians can escape this cauldron just without vehicles, without assets, without tanks, without infantry fighting vehicles, just on their own, without any help, with small groups of 1-2 soldiers crossing river Voskol and running away as fast and as soon as possible. So this is the only option for Ukrainians. But most likely this is also not an option, because the Russians once again control the situation. Furthermore, the Russians are not waiting when Ukrainians will escape this encirclement. Today, for example, we got probably one of the most important videos from this territory, from the village by the name of Kurilovka. So this is the video I'm talking about. And here we can see 2 Russian soldiers that raised the Russian flag above the building on the territory of the settlement by the name of Kurilovka. This building was geolocated. This is not very difficult. And this is exactly the building where Russians raised their flag. So this is it. And obviously we see that this is something like a breakthrough. So this is the situation by the end of the 25th of October, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 26th of October. So Russians managed to establish complete control over logistic, over evacuation roads, and now the Russians, as we can see, are trying to advance from the east in the western direction towards the settlement of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy, and Russians are tasked just for one purpose. They need to cut this big Kupiansk pocket at least in 2 small pockets. The first one around the settlements of Kovsharovka and Novoasinova. This is the southern pocket, and the northern pocket around the settlements of Petropavlovka, Kucherevka.
It's probably hard to talk about all of those things since you can't see the video at the same time, but he's explaining why, and you can see it on paper of why they are doing it this way, and it makes complete sense. I wanted to get, because that was the first part, I think that was Kupiansk, and then they moved on and got into Pokrovsk. And let's see, let's get this one here. Here we go.
Situation, because we see that the Pokrovsk pocket is much smaller than the Kupiansk pocket, probably 4 or 5 times smaller. This just the Pokrovsk pocket is just the city limits of the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, nothing more. We have added additional area, this one, the black one, between the city of Rodinska and the western part of the city of Pokrovsk, which means that this is already a kill zone without any chances for Ukrainians to evacuate themselves or to escape this cauldron using roads through this territory. So once again, the Russians stated that up to 5,500 soldiers were encircled in this area without any chances. If you remember, several days ago, we discussed that Russians issued an ultimatum to Ukrainians to withdraw their positions by Monday of 27th of October of 2025, but most likely, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians didn't use this opportunity, which means that there's just one option, 2 options left for them: to surrender or to stay on the territory of the Pokrovsk agglomeration forever. So this is the situation, and this is exactly what is happening right now.
Yeah, and it's really now Pokrovsk, that I've been following that for a month at least, and Russia has been whittling away, making big gains some days, and it's every once in a while somebody will put out a map of how these movements are made that show the map gains over time, and this guy does it every once in a while. I think he set it up when we were in the Kupiansk side. He said, so if up in Kupiansk we look at where they were 4 days ago and then watch day by day, because he updates the front every single day, that shows some pretty hefty gains. And now in Kupiansk they have 5,000 surrounded, and in Pokrovsk they have 5,500 surrounded, and their choices are surrender or die. Stay there. That's it. and there's no chance for them to retreat out of Pokrovsk, and they can only get out onesie twosies in Kupiansk. It's not good, and so there's that's 10,500. How would you like to be in that unenviable position? It's really not good. All right. Well, that's probably enough of that. He also talked a little bit about the Burevestnik and his deal too. Let's see. The Germans are trying to get Chinese rare earth access, and so they got serious problems trying to get that. And I don't know why I'm mentioning that. It was just a tiny little part of the, and I haven't spoken about it too much before, but I do know a little bit about it. The all of the rare earths, you can't get them from Russia. Where else are you going to get them? It's becoming very, very difficult for the West to get them. And because most of them, this is going to sound terrible, most of them come from BRICS countries. Most of them come from Russia, China, India, places like that. Ukraine had a good share, but they've lost a buttload of them now. And so, let's see. I want to get out of the... I still have plenty of stuff on the Burevestnik, but we've already covered most of that. And... let's see. I'm trying to scroll to where I need to get. And there's too much to see and my eyes hurt anyway. So we'll get there. Oh, yeah. We had the Alaska stuff in Hungary again. And there was another show that Lavrov, I forgot to tell you about the Lavrov interview today. And so I have a detailed sort of like snapshots of each of the segments, right? But what I thought I would do, and this is today, this is just today. The thing came out not too long ago, several hours ago, and here's the executive summary of it all. The Anchorage, Alaska summit set the framework for U.S.-Russian settlement. Washington is wobbling under European and Zelensky pressure. Russia's end is people first, territory second, but the new regions are constitutionally Russian. Ceasefire theater is a stall tactic. And again, durable peace is the only acceptable outcome. Language and minority rights in Ukraine, he mentions, of course, are litmus tests. Buffer zones are now required to stop cross-border attacks. The Budapest memorandum doesn't mean what Western critics said it did, and that Budapest memorandum was crap anyway. Hungary ties are pretty solid. Further Budapest action is on the Americans, means they have to do it. So let's get into a little bit of detail on that. Because here's what Lavrov pointed out. He talked about after the Trump-Putin call on Thursday, October the 16th, Lavrov says Marco Rubio called him 3 days later and reaffirmed the clear understandings from Anchorage and Russia's readiness to proceed at a U.S. comfortable pace. A State Department readout then said the talks were productive and no in-person Lavrov Secretary of State Rubio meeting was needed at this stage. And Lavrov interprets this as the ball is in Washington's court. And he said the deal architecture, deal architecture. He cited a Stephen Witkoff proposal delivered in Moscow pre-Anchorage. Putin, in Anchorage, accepted the concept and framework and asked to move it forward. The U.S. then sought time to consult with the allies, including Zelensky, and Moscow says it is still waiting for a concrete follow-up. So, in my view, that would mean the U.S., didn't get the backing of anybody. Of course, everybody's going to go crying and say, we have to win, and that's nonsense. So Lavrov's read of U.S. politics are unprecedented pressure on Trump from European and American hawks, and Kiev as well, aim to block any U.S.-Russia track. He argues that Trump himself publicly framed the end state as a long-term peace and not a ceasefire. And that's true. I pointed that out on Thursday night. That once again, everybody, it's Russia that won't give a ceasefire. Nope, they won't. And Trump acknowledged it immediately after Alaska. So Anchorage wasn't a photo opportunity for the Russians. It was a template. The problem, Lavrov says, is not Moscow. It is Washington's management by coalition, by these idiots from the deep state and from Europe, and Zelensky himself and the king. I mean, Trump is being pressured, and I think he can't do it. I mean, so now he's going to go over, he's trying to maintain other ways to go around it. He's trying to get to Xi Jinping and see if Xi Jinping will quit buying Russian oil. I doubt that's going to happen. So let's talk a little bit about this ceasefire and durable peace a la Lavrov. Excuse me. What Lavrov quotes Trump's post-Anchorage remarks to argue no to a short-term ceasefire and yes to durable peace. He sat right on it. And you can go back and find Trump saying it, right? And he contrasts this with Macron and everybody else with this ceasefire talk now and keep arming Kiev rhetoric. He talks about Minsk of 2015 as their cautionary tale yet again. The two Minsk Accords didn't work at all. Ceasefire was used to rearm Kiev, and they later openly admitted by Merkel, Holland, and Poroshenko to buy time so they don't have to do what the agreement said. They all said it. And the current EU-UK stance, in Lavrov's view, is that the London coalition messaging that Putin doesn't want peace is really backwards, he says. That's the same thing I say. Boris Johnson sabotaged Istanbul in 2022, and then he profited from his friends selling weapons that he got, that they had approximately $1 billion. Ceasefires are cheap, durable peace is expensive, and Lavrov says Europe won't pay the price. So Western outlets dispute that Johnson makes money off of this, although when he left office he was still selling arms for people, after this. And they some people, but not reputable ones in the West, are still saying that Minsk wasn't a ruse. My ass, it was too. And they emphasize Russian responsibility for what they like to call invasion, right? And it wasn't an invasion. It was defending their own people, defending Russians. Why is it that only the West can have a referendum? Why is that the only case? The referendum only counts if it's done by somebody paid for by the State Department, right? Otherwise, it's BS, right? Only U.S. would have real elections. Not true. Let's see. And he got into that. The territories, referenda, and people first, right? Excuse me. I'm tired today, people. The so-called new regions, these new regions, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Lugansk, are historically Russian territories, and they're now on Russia's constitution. Any settlement must respect that the people there have chosen Russia via referendum. Odessa, he also said, is a historically Russian-built city built by Catherine the Great, with UNESCO criticized for staying silent when her monument was destroyed. He said that, so the monument to her, they tore it down. The Ukrainians tore it down in Odessa, and UNESCO didn't say a word. Nobody says anything, right? He got to talk about negotiability of the conflict. He said, discussions are possible on many issues, but not on the status of the four constitutionalized countries. So for Moscow, it isn't maps, it's the people. Change the people's status. That ship has already sailed. And by the way, they were being killed by Ukrainians since 2014, and we didn't do a damn thing about that. We didn't cry about that at all. They were just kill them. And why? Because they were Russian, and they didn't like it. So he got into also the language and minority rights as a test case. He said root cause number 2 after NATO, because NATO is the first cause, is the eradication of everything Russian, language, culture, and church, by law in Ukraine since 2017, but they started it back in 2014. He cites again the bans on the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is really the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and they made him change the name, and then now they're starting to arrest all of the pastors. They wouldn't let him go, and it's nonsense, and jailing them, and school and media restrictions. He says EU accession should be contingent on restoring minority rights, and he credits Hungary for pushing this in Brussels, because in Western Ukraine they're doing the same thing to people of Hungarian descent, and he'd been talking about that forever. Here's the other one, the children narrative about these tens of thousands of children that the Russians allegedly seized, right? And I've talked about this before. And they've been asking for proof of all of these things forever, and they really have. Every time, I listen to Zakharova, I listen to Lavrov, I listen to Putin even on these topics, but mostly it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs talking about this stuff, which is Zakharova and Lavrov, and they always say the same thing, and they've been saying it forever. They've asked for Western backing. They've asked for something more than what they're getting, and they haven't gotten anything. And and then Zelensky comes over and cries in the Oval Office and still makes the same claim that they've taken tens of thousands of children that the Russians have and stolen them. And what Lavrov said again today is he rebuts that claim. He says against these claims of tens of thousands of deported children, Ukrainian children deported into Russia, Lavrov says Ukraine has provided 339 names. Many are adults or are in Europe. And after Russia asked for a list during all the talks, he says any larger figures are just propaganda BS. So, his litmus test of all these language and minority rights stuff, it isn't in tanks, it's textbooks. Restore language rights, then let's talk peace. And Kiev and Washington non-government organizations allege systemic deportation and deportations and repression by Russia. Ukraine's language laws are defended as state building in wartime, right? They don't dispute that they're doing it. They're just saying, well, we need to care about our state. Zelensky himself is a native Russian speaker, and he had to learn Ukrainian for his job. So he does it, and his Ukrainian is far worse than his Russian. Now let's talk a little bit, because Lavrov also talked about buffer zones, okay? And what they're saying, and this has been being said for the last couple of months, right? New requirements. Because Ukraine strikes across the borders, which they continue to do, into Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk, Russia needs a buffer zone, including in areas never disputed, to protect civilians, because the areas they're bombing into are areas, are shooting from areas, Kharkiv, where Sumy, where the Russians haven't taken a great deal of territory up there, and so the Ukrainians are tiptoeing up to the line and bombing apartment buildings, malls, shopping centers, stuff like that in Belgorod, Bryansk, and Kursk. And so Russia has said, we want a buffer zone. This is nonsense because we got to protect the civilians. He says the end of the war equals when the goals are unchanged from the outset are secured. And these goals haven't been changed. When is the war over? Protection of Russian identifying population, neutrality, no NATO, right? Moscow's been saying the same thing forever. What else? NATO Budapest Memorandum. Let's talk a little bit about that. Ukraine's accession into NATO, of course, is a red line, and he contrasts it with Finland, which is a different context. And the 2008 Georgia War has been used as a Western misreading of red lines. And that explanation, most people do not understand what was going on between Russia and Georgia at that time. And I traveled through that place by car. And I didn't understand it until then, okay? So Georgia and Russia have always been friendly with each other. And there's a disputed sliver of land that goes through there, similar to, other countries have had similar things. And I really wish I could remember the name of it, but I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I've driven through it. So basically what happened is there's a beautiful area in south of Georgia and in the north of Georgia and the south of Russia. And in that whole area is freaking fantastically beautiful. And I have plenty of photos from my time over there and going through it last August, about a year ago, I think it was. And very pretty, very, very pretty. A little more than a year ago. August, September is when I was over there. And it's it's like a 18 kilometers, something like that, like 20 kilometers. It's not all that. It's a sliver of land. And so what they've done is on both ends, now that sliver of land is a buffer zone. And so you have dual crossing of I don't know. I want to say Tamoshny, but whatever, your border guards, the damn border guards, your passport control people that you have to cross at 2 times, right? So you always got to do it 2 times. So basically you got to do it 4 times because you have to cross out of the country because they have to stamp you out, and then you have to cross into the next country. And so what you're doing is you're crossing out, you're crossing in. Then 10, 20 miles later, you're crossing out, you're crossing in again. And so that's the way it has been done. And there's some very pretty areas in there. And so what the U.S. misread that as an opportunity to come in and try to get Georgia, since they were in a conflict with Russia, and they started doing the same thing in Georgia that they're doing in Ukraine, is try to get them into NATO. And they're in Asia. I never understood this NATO nonsense and throwing them all into Asia, trying to get, I don't know, Southeast Asian countries into NATO. But anyway, this has always been a red line for Ukraine to be put into NATO. And Lavrov talked about the Budapest Memorandum, and I've talked about it on this show several times as well. It guaranteed non-nuclear assurances to non-nuclear states, and it allowed for and it said they had to have these principles: minority rights, democracy, and freedom of speech, none of which Ukraine has. They violate all of those principles. And so the Budapest Memorandum that gave these non-nuclear assurance non-aggression status, well, if Ukraine had lived up to it, according to Lavrov, then they wouldn't be having these problems today. But they violate each and every one of these principles. They're a Nazi state, basically. And the Ukrainians, not Russia, are the problem, he says. Europe says Helsinki spirit is being completely ignored, and current leadership is so politicized, and Turkey is actually on the side of normalcy and is trying to help fix it. And that came up, in his speech. And what he said was, if Budapest means anything, it means minorities and speech have to be protected, not just borders and nuclear weapons. Okay? Then he talked a little bit about Hungary and its history and its optics. And he talked about Hungary being involved in this Ukrainian nonsense too, because Western Ukraine has tons of Hungarians in it. And I've given several stories about how Hungarian nationals have been attacked, for you speak Ukrainian, that kind of thing, and everything else. 1956, mutual acceptance of historic reassessment. No wedge at all between Moscow and Budapest in their cooperation continues, he says. They asked him, and this I enjoyed quite a bit. They asked him about the. Remember, I talked about him having the Soviet hoodie. I was in Russia at the time. Was I in Russia or was I in Belarus? I can't remember. But I was very interested in talking about the hoodie. So you remember when Lavrov came over to Alaska with Putin, and he was seen coming into the airport, and he had a sport coat on, and underneath it he had a hoodie that said USSR on it. Well, Russian CCCP, SSSR is what that would be, and he had one. I tried to find one in a stall I was in Moscow, and I tried to find a CCCP thing, but they are all these T-shirts that I didn't want a T-shirt. I wanted a nice hoodie, and so I wanted to find one and wear it through the airport on the way back and see if I could cause any trouble or any stir with that. And I had a suit coat with me, so I was going to wear a hoodie if I could find one, but I couldn't find one. I mean, they're not all that. They had them in a couple of stalls, and I went to this really cool. Krepest is the word. What would that be? Fortress, an old fort in English, and there was a really cool old fort from Tsarist times in the 1800s. So I thought they would have some of the cool places where you could buy some of these, and they had plenty of stalls of people selling, matryoshki, and they were selling shkatulki, little lacquer boxes and stuff, and then plenty of that stuff, and plenty of T-shirts, but no hoodie. Of course, it was August, so maybe they didn't want to have any. But either way, I didn't find any, and I was all depressed about it. And anyway, what he said about that, he said was that a secret signal? And he goes, no, it wasn't a secret signal. He said the USSR was my homeland and nothing to be ashamed of. And he talked about the pride that they feel for the Soviet World War II activities, and he reemphasized that. And then they asked him about the German Democratic Republic, which was part of the collapse of the Soviet Union too, because he said reunification was asymmetrical. The GDR they rewrote. Basically, he's a little upset about it, but he understood that Germany was, it's not that he was initially against it. He's just like a broader critique of how the West rewrites the history and rewrote the post-Cold War social contract by what they did with the German Democratic Republic, which was on the eastern side. East Germany in our lines after they took the wall down. And so basically, the hoodie was not a dog whistle. It was nostalgia for him, he says, and a reminder of who bled at Stalingrad. And, Trump made a couple of errors back when, since in his second term, when he's saying the U.S. won the Second World War. That's offensive to say. And it's certainly not true. The Chinese lost some, what was the number, 18, 20 million, and the Russians lost 26 to 27 million people. And so U.S. lost 600,000. So who paid? Who paid the price? Who defeated a million man German army? Wasn't us. We came in for cleanup at the end after the Russians had already done quite a bit of mopping up. And I don't mean that we didn't participate. We absolutely did. But to say that we won the war is really not fair. Not a and it pisses people off over there, and I understand why. They asked him finally about meetings ahead. Is Budapest, on or off? Because Trump changes his mind every day. Like some people change underwear. Some people, I say, because some people don't change their underwear. Disgusting. Anyway, he said the invitations are there. Putin's agreed in principle to meet Trump in Budapest. They said it was, there's no need for in-person now. Lavrov says the initiative still sits with the Washington. When we're invited, we come. When it's delayed, we wait. So doors open, bell's not ringing. That's basically it. And so let's see. Basically, let's go for a quick review of his entire point. Not a ceasefire, a durable peace. That's the only way it'll hold up. The ball's in Washington's court. We accept the Anchorage framework. These are people talking about Donbass. These are people we're talking about, not squares on a map. Their choice is already part of our Constitution. As far as languages, language rights first. That's the honest test of any settlement of a conflict. Buffer zone talk, he said, because Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk are still getting bombed all the time. And then Budapest. Promise more than borders. It promises minority rights. Let's start there, is what he said. And, they don't, he doesn't, people over here like to say, John, they like to defend Johnson in his money-making post, making Kiev continue the war and get rid of the agreements from Istanbul way back when in 2022. And the children deportation, people like to beat up on Russia for that. UNESCO silence on Catherine the Great statues. The Nazi regime labeling, people don't like to hear that. Budapest memorandum, there are plenty of counterclaims on some of those. But this is what Lavrov has to say about them, and they've been pretty steady on it. And, whether you agree with him or not, you still got to listen to him, I say. And if you actually did something about it or even investigated, I mean, my God, it's just like the Nord Stream 2, that gets blown up and they all go, yeah, and look who you're pointing the finger at. A couple of guys in a speedboat, going up there and destroying this. That's not how it happened. They don't believe that. Frankly, I don't believe it. It's not how it's done. Plus, the old Biden monster said he was going to take him out and going to help people do it. And there were plenty of U.S. and UK assets in that same area at the time. And so, crazy stuff. let's see. I listened also to Alexander Mercouris. He's a guy in England. He's been an analyst for a long time, and he does some pretty good shows. And I'm going to go through this and see. He talked about the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd and Kupiansk, like I did, that he went through these encirclements, and the front line is collapsing. He went through that. And then Konstantinovka. Now he talked about Konstantinovka and Siversk and all the street fighting going on there, claimed by Gerasimov and contested by other people. Yampol is almost liberated. So these places, the front is 70% taken in Kharkiv and toward Volchansk, and some people put it higher. He said that in Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk, 6 more villages have been taken, including Poltavka, Molotov-Machka, and deliberate silence on Kherson ops. So what he says, the pace isn't square kilometers per week, it's nodes falling per week. He takes it as the city approach. And there's always, 5 to 7 taken every week. And what else did he talk about? He talked about that cruise missile too, and but he also talked about jet-assisted FABs. In these FAB bombs, or precision-guided munitions, appear with small jet engines on them. So what Russia was doing with these FAB bombs is they take all these what do you call them? Dumb bombs, if you want to call them that, in I suppose, since they don't have, they were just dropped, like in the, World War I, World War II. The bombs were just dropped from airplanes, and they would have to be, that's why they'd have, the hold would open up, and out would come all these bombs, and now would be that. They didn't have their own propulsion or anything like that. And now, and Russia had massive quantities of these FAB bombs everywhere. And what they did was they put these kits on them to get them so they would be dropped from the plane, but then these wings would pop out with these propeller kits, and they would guide them. So they're guided bombs, but these are heavy bombs, like massive. And so that's what an FAB is. And he said now they're putting small jet engines on them, and it's extending the reach for the Su-34s to strike hundreds of kilometers deep into the Ukrainian territories. And the payload advantage of these sorts of bombs are huge versus these drones and missiles, because the whole thing is a bomb. Does that make sense? So with a drone, you create the drone and you attach a bomb to it, or you put something on it. With a FAB bomb, you're taking a bomb that's already there. Like they have FAB 3000s, FAB 1500s, FAB 500s that are basically the kilogram weight of the bomb. And then so this bomb is huge, and then they put, and you ought to watch some of them explode, and they've been all over the place. And Russia still has hundreds of thousands of these damn things that have been stored for 100 years. And so they're fitting them with these kits, and now they're fitting them with jet engines. They can go all the way across Ukraine. So this is not good. When your bombs grow engines, every depot is a frontline target. I mean, that's how it is. He talked a little bit about the Burevestnik too, and casualties. He disputes so do I. This is nonsense. And anybody who has any brain at all is not saying that Russia is losing 5 times more than the Ukrainians. It's BS, and in fact, it's likely the opposite, that Ukrainians are losing 5 times. It's a huge number. The August Ukrainian casualty count, according to some estimates, is 1.6 million dead. And, Nonsensical nonsense. So, I don't know. I want to get to a couple of stories that were put out today too. This one I'm only doing, I realize this isn't international, was not international, but it's freaking hilarious. This came out in the news today, and maybe if the old JR is listening, maybe he's heard it as well, but it's friggin' hilarious. Harris is hinting that she could run for president again. Oh boy, she's not done with politics. Former VP Kamala Harris indicated she may make another bid for the presidency despite her 2024 defeat to the old Trumpster. In an interview with the BBC on Saturday, Harris, who is 61, said she is certain the world will see a woman in charge of the White House in their lifetime. I don't know who that there is. Asked whether she could be the one, she said, possibly, adding that she has not made a decision on whether to run in 2028. Yeah, but who'd give her permission? That's my question. She has to have permission from the, what does JR call him? I know JR calls him Bathhouse Barry, but there was a funny one that came up the other night that I heard Barry I can't remember what he called him, but I thought it was hilarious. Anyway, she says, I am not done. I have lived my entire career a life of service. Oh, yeah, she's a service provider, all right. And it's in my bones. Yes, let's all cry for you. And there are many ways to serve. Yeah, I have not decided yet what I will do in the future beyond what I'm doing right now. Harris was pressed on her political odds in the White House race after bookmakers placed her behind celebrity figures such as actor and former pro wrestler Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. She was unfazed, said, I've never listened to polls, obviously. If I listened to polls, I would not have run for my first office or my second, and I certainly wouldn't be sitting here in this interview. Aw. Harris became the Democrat. Yeah, the rest of this is history. But let's get to this. With the next presidential race 3 years away, media outlets have speculated that a possible Democratic contenders in 2028 would include Harris, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Ugh! Just makes me want to puke on all three of those. Yuck! Among the Republicans, VP J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio are regarded as the most likely key contenders. Trump himself has hinted that he might seek a third term, although the Constitution bars any president from being elected more than twice. Curious, isn't it? Wonder what'll happen. Here you go. This one, here's how things are going in Ukraine. Ready? Notorious gang leaders are helping the Ukraine police with forced conscription. There's a guy named Magomed Aidamirov. Okay? A suspected gang leader is aiding Ukrainian recruitment officials in their mobilization efforts, according to several news outlets. The man was previously accused of orchestrating kidnappings in Odessa. Identified by the media as Magomed Aidamirov, the man appears in a video that shows the actions of draft officers first published by a local Telegram channel. In it, a bearded man in camouflage threatens an individual who is speaking with a police officer searching for a potential conscripts on the street. Aidemirov was arrested in 2018 on suspicion of running a gang responsible for kidnapping, racketeering from 2015 to 2017. The police reportedly found explosives, weapons, and a machine gun during searches linked to this gang's activities. The suspected gang leader allegedly has close ties to members of the so-called Ukrainian volunteer battalions that Kiev uses in military crackdown against Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics after they declared independence following the 2014 Maidan coup. These units had Ukrainian ultra-nationalists and neo-Nazis in their ranks. He was released from custody 2 years after his detention and was placed under house arrest, with certain materials in his case disappearing from the court data. The Ukrainian authorities have not commented on these reports. Ukraine introduced a general mobilization, blah, blah, blah. We won't hear about that. But here's another one for you. Get this. You want to talk about freedom of speech, huh? Here's some freedom of speech Ukrainian style for you. Ready? Ukraine is told to stop sharing violent conscription videos. Ukraine conscription authorities have called on citizens to refrain from documenting cases of violent, forced military enlistment, instead urging the population to cherish their recruitment officers. The message, shared on Wednesday by the Kiev Regional Territorial Center for Recruitment and Social Support, condemned a Telegram channel called Stop TCK, which is this group, Territorial Center for Recruitment. Stop TCK Ukraine, which has been circulating videos of men being violently detained and forced into enlistment vehicles, incidents dubbed popularly bussification that often go viral. The center alleged the channel was part of Russian information warfare and told Ukrainians to never watch videos of bussification. For God's sake, don't film or share such videos, said the Post. If the Russians turn you into sheep, they'll slaughter you like pigs tomorrow. So cherish the TCKs, help the TCKs, assist and protect them. They are the only ones filling the ranks of frontline units. Let's see. Kiev's mobilization campaign has been marred by widespread draft evasion and corruption, with reports of wealthy citizens bribing officials to avoid service. Then they all end up in the United States and Europe. Defense authorities claim incidents of excessive force are rare. They aren't rare according to the channels that I've been seeing. You ought to go to the one, what was it called? The channel, we got to find that. This Telegram channel, did they list the name of it? But there's plenty of them over there. It's called, well, they listed it. Telegram channel is called Stop TCK Ukraine, right? More humor from Ukraine. Ukrainian officer moved troops from the front to his wife's kebab kiosk. A Ukrainian military officer is charged with abuse of power after diverting two of his subordinates from combat and assigning them to work at his wife's kebab kiosk, said the State Bureau of Investigations. According to the agency, the scheme ran for nearly 2 years and benefited the officer and the soldiers, who are now being prosecuted separately for fraudulently avoiding military service. The officer served as deputy commander of an unidentified regiment battalion level unit, while the soldiers were officially listed on the defense ministry's payroll and even received combat pay. They were, in fact, working as laborers for their superior's family, including help run the food stand. The total damage to the state is estimated around $100,000. The Ukrainian military has a persistent problem with corruption, no doubt, which, among other things, undermines Kiev's ongoing mobilizations. Many Ukrainians seek to bribe their way out of conscription or go into hiding to avoid service under a system widely perceived as discriminating against the poor and throwing them on the front line. Recent survey by Kiev International Institute, more than 70% of respondents said corruption has worsened over the past 3 years, and while only 5% say they saw a bit of improvement. How about that? There's one NATO state that's bringing back the draft, allegedly. Croatia. We won't get into that story, though, because we are going to wrap it up tonight. My name is Samuel Trapp. This is and has been International Flavor. My shows do get recorded, and they will be placed out at internationalflavor.com for your listening pleasure. I'll be here again tomorrow night. I'm here every night, Sunday through Thursday, 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Chicago time. And I appreciate you being here and hope you return again tomorrow. Thank you very much and have a very good night.
Now, back to The Rock on Damn Radio.